Yes, Mr. Chair. Mr. Dunbar.
Here.
Ms. Kennedy.
Here.
Mr. Constant.
Here.
Ms. LaFrance.
Here.
Mr. Rivera.
Present.
Ms. Quinn Davidson.
Here.
Mr. Peterson.
Present.
Ms. Allard.
Here.
Mr. Perez-Verdia.
Here.
Ms. Zalatel.
Here.
Mr. Weddleton.
Here.
You have a quorum.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Madam Clerk, can you please lead us in the pledge? Thank you, Madam Clerk. Minutes of previous meetings, we have none. Mayor's report. Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Just wanted to say that in our second week of easing up, things are going well. We are cautiously optimistic, and if the Assembly has any questions, I'd be happy to entertain them at this time.
Thank you. Ms. LaFrance.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We've been receiving a number of emails from folks asking about the hockey rinks, and I understand that there will be some revised orders coming from the state maybe as early as the end of this week and maybe for the Muni as early as next week. Do you have any information about ice rinks or indoor athletic facilities right now as far as what steps they can expect next in the opening up process?
No, we don't have anything on hockey rinks at this point, but Boki and Dempsey are currently in alternative use, although Dempsey is freeing up, and we are hoping to free up Boki sometime soon. But currently, we're working in conjunction with the state to make sure that our guidelines are parallel, and those are ongoing discussions. But I would advise people that just because we've been eased up for a week, we need to watch the trend lines more than a week, because this is really a snapshot of the way things were, not the way things are.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. May I just follow up? So the specific emails that we received a number of them had to do with the O'Malley subway ice rink, and just a lot of folks very eager to get back on the ice. Thanks.
Thank you. Any other questions for the mayor? Okay, not seeing any. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Moving on to Assembly Chair's report. So a few things. First, as always, on the 2020 census, just an FYI that field operations will be resumed for many parts of the state tomorrow except for Anchorage. So we don't have to necessarily worry about that within the municipality, but other parts of the state, they will be seeing folks out in full PPE, resuming their field operations. Please continue to encourage folks to take the census online, over the phone, or by paper. Today is going to be the last meeting with the old agenda, so say goodbye to that, and starting on the 19th, get ready for the new agenda. Also, members will notice that we are reading and allowing up to 2 individuals to accept recognition resolutions once again. We've also made modifications to allow up to 8 members to join us in person. So we have 6 here in person today, and look forward to seeing if we can get some more folks to join us on the 19th in person. With that, I'll go ahead and move on to committee reports. I will start on this side of the dais with Mr. Weddleton.
All right, thank you. The Community and Economic Development Committee met last week, and we looked at, again, and continue to look at some changes in the inspection fees that were started earlier this year and impacted some industries more than others, particularly roofing and plumbing and places that might do smaller remodels, and we're getting hit with pretty extensive inspection fees. We'll continue to look at that. We're also brushing off a proposal to create a advisory commission to review marijuana licenses, and that would take it away from the work that the Community and Economic Development Committee has been doing for the last 4 years. So we'll try to get something going on that in the next month or so and start forming that commission. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Zolotel.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The Committee on Homelessness will meet on the 20th of May from 11 till 12:30. We are still getting our digital platform together for that. We expect to discuss this summer's camp abatement process, the current status of shelter, and when we may be winding down the mass shelter, as well as starting to preview conversations around or getting subjects for conversation around the alcohol tax. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Perez-Verdia.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Tomorrow at 11 o'clock is a meeting of the Public Safety Committee. We encourage members to attend. We will be discussing the role of the committee and priorities for the committee in the coming year. And we will also have a presentation from the volunteer fire department out in Chudak. So we encourage people to come and participate. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Mr. Peterson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. No report this evening.
Thank you. Ms. Quinn Davidson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Ms. LaFrance and I will be holding the Health Policy Committee meeting tomorrow at 10 a.m. I think it'll be a really good one. We're going to have Ms. Pineda, the Director of the Health Department, there to give us a report on the department generally, how everything is going, and then specifically have a conversation with a lot of time for questions from members about COVID-19 and our response.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. LaFrance.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The Budget and Finance Committee had a special meeting last week, and we had a briefing on the request for $10 million in emergency funds from, the briefing was by Mr. Wilbur. These funds are actually, or the request is item 14A on tonight's agenda, and it's to cover the labor and commitments through May. We also had a discussion on CARES Act funding and the governor's proposal to allocate the 45% directly to communities, which is $156 million to Anchorage as proposed. The guidelines are expected to change, and we expect to get more information this week. There will be a regular Budget and Finance Committee meeting next week, Thursday, May 14th at noon via Teams. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Mr. Constant.
Thank you. I have no report other than we will be resuming the work of the Enterprise Utility Oversight Committee. I believe we have a meeting scheduled for the 21st, just after our next meeting. But a moment of personal privilege. I would note that today is the National Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Girls Day. And so across the country, we've been, and in Canada as well, reckoning with the fact that Indigenous women and girls are missing and murdered at a rate far higher than any other group that we have really tracking up here. And it's kind of it is a terrible thing. And I have actually had some discussions with the chiefs of police, and I'm looking forward to a meaningful conversation in Anchorage about what that actually means in our community and how we can help to avert that for the future.
Thank you. Ms. Kennedy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. No further reports. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Dunbar.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. No report.
Thank you. Ms. Allard.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Nothing at this time.
Thank you. Moving on in our agenda to the addendum to the agenda. Madam Vice Chair.
Move to incorporate the addendum and lay on the table items as printed and distributed.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Madam Vice Chair?
Yes, these items include later on the table item 9E3, Assembly Information Memorandum, which includes public testimony for tonight's meeting. Item 9E2 from Chair Rivera, Assembly Informational Memorandum, reports from the administration, the mayor, regarding any emergency measures taken under the proclamation of emergency for COVID-19, extended by Assembly Resolution AR 2020-85 as amended. Next item is laid on the table item number 9A4A, which is the S version of the resolution of the Anchorage Municipal Assembly recognizing May 7th, 2020 as the National Day of Prayer and designated May 7th as the Municipality of Anchorage Day of Prayer. Next is the unnumbered item, which is the resolution of the Anchorage Assembly celebrating Eagle River High School's successful effort to rename Wolfden Drive and the outstanding accomplishments of Bella Johnston and the team she led for their success. Next, we have EO number 2024S. This is corresponds to 14A, it's the S version of that item, an emergency ordinance providing financial resources for labor, supplies, and other expenditures required to address municipal response to coronavirus disease 2019, COVID-19, by appropriating an amount not to exceed $11 million. And should that be 12? Did we have an updated document? Or is it 11?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that again? Which item are you talking about?
Item 14A, and the most recent document I have is for an S version that is for $11 million appropriation, but I was just wondering if there was an update to that I should be reading instead.
Mr. Wilbur and members of the administration are shaking their heads, so no.
Okay, thank you. $10 million, So I'll start again. An emergency ordinance providing financial resources for labor, supplies, and other expenditures required to address municipal response to coronavirus disease 2019, i.e. COVID-19, by appropriating an amount not to exceed $11 million from an interfund loan from the Area-Wide General Fund 101000 to the COVID-19 Fund 231802, approving a temporary exception to the unreserved fund balance designation policy for the municipality of Anchorage and providing a plan for future reimbursement of such appropriations. And finally, we have unnumbered AO that was just laid on the table, an ordinance amending Anchorage Municipal Code Chapter 3.80 to add a section providing for automatic suspension of certain code provisions during a state of emergency, including the prohibitions and requirements regarding plastic shopping bags. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair. Is there any opposition to incorporation of those items as read into the agenda? Going to wait a second for the phone. Okay, seeing no opposition, then that motion passes. So moving on to the consent agenda items numbered 9A through 9F are typically routine or non-controversial items such as bid awards, new business, information reports, and ordinances and resolutions for introduction. The items on the consent agenda may be approved by the Assembly by a single vote on a motion to approve the consent agenda. Prior to approval, items may be pulled by an Assembly member for discussion and separate vote on each of those items. Under the Assembly Rules of Procedure, all ordinances and some resolutions will have an opportunity for public hearing on a future date. I'm going to go ahead and go down the dais and see what folks want to pull from the consent agenda. I'll go ahead and start with Ms. Allard.
I'm good, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Dunbar.
Thank you. No items.
Thank you. Ms. Kennedy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to pull item 9A4, item 9D Delta 9, and item 9 Echo 2. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Constant.
Thank you. I would like to pull item 9A1 for reading.
Thank you. Ms. LaFrance.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would like to pull two items for reading, 9 Alpha 1 and 9 Alpha 6.
Yep. I'm sorry, Mr. Chair. I misread mine. I would need a 9 Alpha 3. Sorry.
Okay. Thank you. Ms. Quinn Davidson.
Nothing for me, thanks.
Thank you. Mr. Peterson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to pull 9A2. 9A2.
Thank you. Mr. Perez-Verdia.
No items. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Ms. Zolotel.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. 9A5 for reading.
Thank you. Mr. Whittleton.
Nothing. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, I'm going to go back through the list. So I have items 9A1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. 9D, that's Delta 9, and 9E, Echo 2. Any other items? Okay, hearing none, Madam Vice Chair.
Move to approve the consent agenda with the exception of the pulled items.
Second.
Moved and seconded by Mr. Peterson. Any opposition to that motion? Okay, seeing none, that motion passes. For the public's information, the Assembly has now passed or accepted all items 9A through 9E, other than the items that were just pulled, which we will take up next, or that have been introduced for a future public hearing, which are all the items in 9F. If you are here to see action on an item listed on the consent agenda that was not pulled, those items have been passed or accepted. Okay, we're going to go ahead and start going through these items, starting with item 9A1. And so for folks presenting the resolutions, we should, in order to maintain social distancing, let's go ahead and put the resolution on the dais, and then we can take a picture 6 feet apart with the folks who come to accept the resolution. So 9A1, AR number 2020-131, a resolution of the Anchorage Municipal Assembly recognizing and honoring May 16th, 2020 as Kids to Parks Day in the city of Anchorage, Alaska. What is the will of the body?
Move to approve.
Second.
Moved and seconded by Mr. Constant. Any opposition to adoption? Passage. Seeing none, that is approved. Who is reading and who is presenting?
I'm reading, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, I'm reading.
Okay, and who's presenting? Do we not have? So this is 9A1. Do you not have a copy of that one? Okay. Yeah, go ahead.
A resolution of the Anchorage Municipal Assembly recognizing and honoring May 16, 2020 as Kids to Parks Day in the city of Anchorage, Alaska. Whereas May 16, 2020 marks the 10th anniversary of Kids to Parks Day, organized and launched by the National Park Trust, held annually on the third Saturday of May. And whereas creating spaces that promote engagement, risk-taking, and diversity includes designing for multiple types of learning styles and multiple types of physical, social, and cognitive opportunities. And within the municipality of Anchorage, community advisory groups assist in designing these inclusive spaces, volunteering countless hours to benefit all residents of our city. And whereas in Anchorage, we believe in providing a fun and inclusive play environment for children and adults who experience a wide spectrum of mental, physical, and social challenges. And as of June 2018, the MOA, Anchorage, Eagle River, and Girdwood, actively manages 103 playground facilities. And whereas Kids to Parks Day empowers kids and encourages families to get outdoors and visit America's parks, public lands, and waters, encouraging children to lead a more active lifestyle to combat issues of childhood obesity, diabetes, hypertension, and hypercholesterolemia. And whereas Kids to Parks Day will broaden children's appreciation for nature and will help to form a lifelong bond with the outdoors. And now, therefore, the Anchorage Assembly hereby proclaims May 16, 2020 as Kids to Parks Day, passed and approved by the Anchorage Assembly this 5th day of May, 2020.
Ma'am, if you wanted to speak to it, you may, but I do have a question for you if you don't want to speak to it.
Hi, thank you. My name is Diana Rhodes, and I'm with the Anchorage Park Foundation. And we are the nonprofit partner to the Municipality of Anchorage Parks and Recreation Department. And we thank you very much for this exciting opportunity to celebrate our parks in one more way and to get children and people out into the parks to celebrate. We've been really, in this crazy time, I think our parks and trails now more than ever are seen as places where we can safely social distance ourselves, but also get the kind of activity that we need and just breathing in the natural air. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Mr. Weddleton?
Well, thanks. More of a question for the mayor. Will our playgrounds be open on May 16th?
Through the chair, Assemblymember Weddleton, the mayor is not in the room at the moment. As far as the facilities open on the 16th, our plan is to reassess on May 15th as to when they will actually be open.
Good deal. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Constant?
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I just would note, I was walking through my usual dog walking path, and every playground on Government Hill was filled with people playing today. So whether or not officially we have made that policy, there's a de facto action happening right now. So
thank you. Thank you so much. All right. Next item before us is 9A2, AR number 2020-132, a resolution of the Anchorage Municipal Assembly recognizing National Historic Preservation Month. What is the will of the body?
Moved, approved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any opposition? Seeing none, that item is approved. Who's reading and who's presenting?
I'm reading. Not sure who's presenting.
We're getting back into the rhythm of doing this.
All right. We haven't been practicing this much the last month or so, so we're a little rusty.
Yeah.
So, AR number 2020-132, the resolution of the Anchorage Municipal Assembly recognizing National Historic Preservation Month. Whereas this place matters is the theme of the Natural Historic Preservation Month, May 2020. And whereas the municipality of Anchorage has a number of historic places we're seeing, saving, and celebrating. And whereas historic preservation is an effective tool for managing growth and sustainable development, revitalizing neighborhoods, fostering local pride, and maintaining community character while enhancing livability. And whereas historic preservation is inherently economically, environmentally, and socially sustainable, fostering a culture of reuse and maximizing the life cycle of all resources through conservation, historic preservation is relevant for communities across the nation, both urban and rural, and for Americans of all ages, all walks of life, and all ethnic backgrounds. And whereas it's important to celebrate the role of history in our lives and the contributions made by dedicated individuals in helping to preserve the tangible aspects of the heritage that has shaped us as a people. Many Anchorage residents, groups, and organizations work hard to preserve Anchorage's past for future generations. And whereas the Alaska Association of Historic Preservation, Incorporated, and the Anchorage Historic Properties Commission are supportive of National Historic Preservation Month. And now, therefore, the municipality of Anchorage does proclaim May 2020 as National Historic Preservation Month and call upon the people of Anchorage to join their fellow citizens across the United States in recognizing and participating in this special month through the activities that are happening in our community during the month of May. Passed and approved by the Anchorage Assembly this 5th day of May, 2020.
Welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Christine Bunnell, staff to the Anchorage Historic Preservation Commission, and Frank Flavin with Alaska Association for Historic Preservation. Thank you so much for this proclamation. The Historic Preservation Program was reinstated in 2006 with lofty goals, and there has been many accomplishments. We have 2 recent historic districts that were listed on the National Register. We have 3 cultural interpretive installations that have occurred over the last few years that include Dena'ina history, our engineering history, and local Anchorage history. We have a historic preservation plan, an interpretive plan that's guiding our efforts. And we've restored the Pioneer Schoolhouse, and of course we support the Oscar Anderson House and its operations. The history of each community council is important, and we're working on that. And we're enjoying a wonderful partnership with the State Historic Preservation Office and with AAHP here. And we just appreciate your support in this proclamation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. All right, moving on, we have before us 9A3, AR number 2020-133, a resolution of the Anchorage Municipal Assembly recognizing May 8th through 15th, 2020 as Police Memorial Week and an opportunity for remembering and honoring those who have made the ultimate sacrifice in service to our community. What is the will of the body?
Move to approve.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any opposition?
He'll be down.
Seeing none, that is approved. Who is reading?
I'll be reading.
Okay.
A resolution of the Anchorage Municipal Assembly recognizing May 8th to 15th, 2020 as Police Memorial Week and an opportunity for remembering and honoring those who have made the ultimate sacrifice in service to our community. Whereas Police Memorial Week is an opportunity to pay tribute to the memory of fallen law enforcement officers who've made the ultimate sacrifice for our community, and to recognize those who currently serve by enforcing our laws, bringing criminals to justice, and making our communities safer. And whereas the citizens of the municipality of Anchorage fulfill an important civic responsibility by supporting the work of law enforcement in protection of our community. And whereas, behind the name of each officer who died in the line of duty lies a story of courage and devotion, as well as a deep sense of loss for the service, the country, and above all, for friends, family, and partners. We can never repay these gallant men and women for their service, nor adequately comfort their families. We can only honor their memory in our determination to forge a stronger, safer community, which they helped purchase with their lives. And whereas, since 1897, 68 law enforcement officers have fallen statewide, including the following Anchorage Police Department officers who gave their lives in the line of duty. Chief John J. Sturgis, 1921. Chief Harry C. Kavanaugh, 1924. Officer Benjamin F. Strong, 1968. Officer William G. Falmer, Jr., 1970. Officer Jonathan P. Flora, 1975. Officer Harry Keir, 1980. Officer Harry B. Hansen, Jr., 1986. Officer Louis G. Mizell, 1989. Officer Dan R. Seeley, 1996. Officer Justin T. Wollum, 2001. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Anchorage Assembly remembers and honors all those officers who have died in the line of duty by recognizing May 8th to 15th, 2020 as Police Memorial Week. Be it further resolved that the Anchorage Assembly encourages all residents to thank the men and women who serve our community and protect our citizens, and to remember and to honor the fallen who gave their lives in this service. Passed and approved by the Anchorage Assembly this 5th day of May, 2020.
Welcome, Chief.
Welcome. Thank you. I just want to say thank you to everyone for again honoring us for Police Memorial Week. It's something that's really important to everyone at APD. You know, looking at the list of officers here, the last two officers on the list, Officer Seeley and Officer Wollum, both were killed during my time here at APD. In fact, I knew Officer Wollum fairly well. So this is something that's near and dear to all of our hearts, and we really appreciate the effort that you went through to recognize us.
Thank you. Thank you so much. All right. Next item is 9A4, AR number 2020-157. I'm going to assume the S version. A resolution of the Anchorage Municipal Assembly recognizing May 7th, 2020 as the National Day of Prayer and designating May 7th as a Municipality of Anchorage Day of Prayer. What is the will of the body?
Move to approve.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any opposition? Okay, seeing none. We don't have anyone to present, but Ms. Kennedy, did you want to go through this item?
Yes, Mr. Chair, I would like to go through that.
Go ahead.
So thank you. And first, I do want to say that last year when we had this resolution before us, we had a group of probably 10 to 12 different religious leaders in our community, and it was wonderful to see all of them together, and it just kind of saddens me to think that we couldn't do that for all of them again this year. I do want to say that I did begin to make the effort to invite some of our religious leaders to accept this resolution, but it was too hard to decide which two I would pick out of that entire group. So rather than offend anybody or feel like we were leaving somebody out, I just felt like it was better that we just remembered all of them last year, and since it's a National Day of Prayer on Thursday, maybe we'll be praying on Thursday that we won't have to do it this way next year. So without any further ado, Mr. Chair, a resolution of the Anchorage Municipal Assembly recognizing May 7th, 2020 as the National Day of Prayer and designating May 7th as a Municipality of Anchorage Day of Prayer. Whereas National Day of Prayer is an annual observance day when Americans are encouraged to give thanks, meditate peacefully, or take time out of the day to visit their church, synagogue, temple, shrine, in nature or mosque, and to pray according to one's personal practice. And whereas every year the National Day of Prayer calls on millions of Americans of different faiths across the U.S. to be unified in public prayer, to pray for the nation and its leaders. And whereas the National Day of Prayer shares common roots with Thanksgiving, an early traditional observance of prayer and Thanksgiving, later established as the Thanksgiving holiday by President Lincoln, and traditional observances in spring called for prayer and fasting, which was later established as the National Day of Prayer by a joint resolution of Congress in 1952, signed by President Truman, then amended in 1988 to permanently set the first Thursday in May as National Day of Prayer, signed by President Reagan, having been proclaimed by the President every year since. And whereas prayer has played a part throughout several centuries of our country's history, from as early as 1668, when the House of Burgesses in Jamestown appointed a day of humiliation, fasting, and prayer, to present day with approximately 149 national calls to prayer in between. And whereas currently in the spring of 2020, as the entire nation deals with the threat and challenges of coronavirus, this year's call to prayer is just as timely as it was in 1832 when a devastating outbreak of cholera in New York spurred U.S. Senator Henry Clay from Kentucky to ask for a joint resolution from Congress to request President Jackson set a day of public humiliation, prayer, and fasting to be observed by the people of the United States with religious solemnity. And whereas the National Day of Prayer belongs to all Americans, and every American can observe in their own way, expressing unity, love, and respect for each other. And whereas in Anchorage, many individuals, institutions, and religious groups pray for Anchorage daily and will celebrate the National Day of Prayer. And now, therefore, the Anchorage Municipal Assembly recognizes May 7th, 2020 as a Municipal Day of Prayer and encourages the people of the Municipality of Anchorage to join their community and express thanks and to pray for their nation, community, and leaders. Passed and approved by the Anchorage Assembly this 5th day of May, 2020.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
All right, so the next item before us is item 9A5, a resolution of the Anchorage Assembly recognizing and honoring the work of Welcoming Anchorage and language interpreters to ensure translation of COVID-19 materials to various languages. What is the will of the body?
Move to approve.
Second.
Moved and seconded by Ms. Zolotel. Any opposition? Seeing none, that item is approved. Who's reading, who's presenting?
I'm reading, Mr. Chair.
Okay.
A resolution of the Anchorage Assembly recognizing and honoring the work of Welcoming Anchorage and language interpreters to ensure translation of COVID-19 materials to various languages. Whereas in March 2020, Anchorage began responding to an unprecedented outbreak and global pandemic caused by the novel coronavirus. And whereas, due to the nature of the virus, new guidance regarding health, safety, and life-preserving measures is required on an ongoing basis with information changing daily. And whereas, failures to receive updates in a timely and easily understood manner put residents at risk. And whereas, more than 100 languages are spoken within the Anchorage School District. And whereas Anchorage became a welcoming city in 2014 and adopted the Welcoming Anchorage Roadmap in 2017, which, among other things, included the assurance of language access so that all people in the municipality can participate in their government. And whereas a team of interpreters have worked tirelessly to ensure updates on emergency orders, public health guidance, and community updates are available in as many languages as possible. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Anchorage Municipal Assembly recognizes and honors the contributions of Welcoming Anchorage and the team of interpreters working to make sure all residents have access to timely and up-to-date information during the response to the COVID-19 pandemic. Passed and approved by the Anchorage Assembly this 5th day of May, 2020.
Okay. Moving on, the next item before us is 9A6, resolution number AR 2020-159, a resolution of the Anchorage Assembly recognizing and honoring the work of American Sign Language interpreters during the coronavirus outbreak. What is the will of the body?
Move to approve.
Second.
Moved and seconded by Ms. LaFrance. Any opposition? Seeing none, that item is approved. Who's reading? Who's presenting?
I'm reading, Mr. Chair.
Okay.
A resolution of the Anchorage Assembly recognizing and honoring the work of American Sign Language interpreters during the coronavirus outbreak. Whereas in March 2020, Anchorage began responding to an unprecedented outbreak and global pandemic caused by the novel coronavirus. Whereas due to the nature of the virus, new guidance regarding health, safety, and life-preserving measures is required on an ongoing basis, with information changing daily. Whereas failure to receive updates in a timely and easily understood manner puts residents at extreme risk. Whereas there are around 25,000 people in Alaska who are deaf or hard of hearing. Whereas American Sign Language, ASL, is the primary language used by 2,000 to 3,000 of these Alaskans who are deaf. Whereas ASL interpreters have worked tirelessly to attend press conferences and provide critical updates immediately. Whereas ASL interpreters have overcome many obstacles to provide their service effectively, like comprehending the volume of information, incorporating new signs for new terms, and presentation format challenges. Whereas interpreters have taken on substantial risk by attending community briefings and updates in person to provide the most clear and correct information possible. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Anchorage Assembly recognizes and honors the life-saving work of American Sign Language interpreters in providing public information updates throughout the coronavirus pandemic response, passed and approved by the Anchorage Assembly this 5th day of May, 2020.
Sure. Yeah. All right. Come up? Yeah, welcome.
Hi, my name is Jamie Hartung, and thank you for this recognition. We are here tonight, just the two of us, to accept it on behalf of all of the interpreters that have been providing services through this time. Unfortunately, because of the pandemic and the mandates, only two of us could arrive tonight. There is a very large team of interpreters that provide these services, so in recognizing all of them, thank you. And we also want to say thank you to the Assembly here for valuing accessibility. The deaf community values this, and without you guys giving us the space to interpret, that accessibility would not be there. So again, thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Courtney Westman. I'm one of the deaf interpreters. Another deaf interpreter you may have seen, Byron Jensen. He's been involved in a lot of different press conferences, providing communication. So again, thank you for the recognition and providing access for the deaf community. We truly appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. Yeah, just to comment on this one and the previous resolution, I just want to give a huge thanks to the administration for your work and to the interpreters and the translators to ensure that all residents have access to information. We know that in most cases, access equals justice, and it would be easy to ignore these specific populations. And that would have been a gross injustice. So thank you so much to the administration, to the interpreters, and to the translators. Thank you. Oh, Sharon, I think Mr. Gates has something as well. Okay. Great, there we go.
Now I know how talkative the...
All right. Moving on in our agenda, we now have before us item 9D9. That's AM number 265-2020, non-encumbering contract amendment number 4 to contract number 4400000651 with LeMay Engineering and Consulting, Inc. to provide temporary support and payroll services to the municipality of Anchorage. What is the will of the body?
Move to approve.
Second.
Moved and seconded by Ms. Kennedy. Ms. Kennedy, you pulled this. Did you want to speak to it?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I actually had gotten some questions answered in regard to this one, and I just kind of wanted to do some follow-up on it. One of my questions was about the fact that this contract started out at like $500,000 and it's now around the $3 million mark. So my question, though, was it seemed to me that in the response that I got that there was potential for not meeting all the extent to this contract. So I was wondering if this just means that we're approving an additional $1 million, but we don't really know if we need it. And if that's the case, why didn't we just wait to see if we needed it before we actually approved to that extent?
Do we know how much stuff is coming? Does she know?
Through the chair, this is Lance Wilbert, O&B Director. I'm going to start, and I think Mr. Haddon is on the phone, and he can jump in. Assemblymember Kennedy, one of the reasons that we asked for this one is in the past probably 3 to 4 months, we've consumed over, I think, $500,000 of this contract, and in anticipation that we may need more of their services. You are correct. We are asking for additional resources that actually encumbering them that we might not actually need to spend all, but we're planning ahead. Thank you.
Do you have a follow-up, Ms. Kennedy?
Well, yes, and I guess I'm just looking at what the difference is between trying to plan ahead in this respect versus waiting to see if we actually would need it and then asking for the approval of the extension. Why now?
Through the chair, Assemblymember Kennedy, I'm going to ask and see if Mr. Haddon is on the phone, if he could help me with this one for the timing.
Mr. Haddon, are you with us? On the phone.
Hello, Mr. Wilbur. This is Ron Haddon. Can you hear me?
Yes. So, Assemblymember Kennedy, if you would please repeat the question for Mr. Haddon. Thank you.
Certainly, thank you. My question is, if we don't know that we need this contract, why are we not just waiting to see if we might need it? Why go ahead and improve it to that extent kind of like double what we would normally be looking at? Why are we going ahead and approving that extension to that extent, to that amount now?
Ms. Kennedy, can you hear me okay now?
Yes, I do, Mr. Haddon. Thank you.
The reason we are asking for an additional amount on this contract, there is no capacity left on the contract at this time. We have used the full capacity of the contract.
Okay, that makes sense then. My understanding was that this was for something in the future that we didn't know we needed yet.
Yeah, so Mr. Haddon, I think you might have a TV or some other device that's echoing. So if you can turn the sound off on that the second device that you have going, that would be great. Turn the sound off on that second device that you have going, that is great. Thank you. Did you have a response to that question, Mr. Haddon?
Yes, ma'am. At the time that this AM was written, there was about $49,000 left on the contract, and since that time that the AM was written, we have consumed that $49,000 remaining, and we are asking for an additional amount in case there are future requirements, either related to COVID-19 or to other municipal requirements.
Do you have a final follow-up, Ms. Kennedy?
No, I think I'm probably getting the answer that I'm going to get, so thank you.
Thank you. I don't see any other discussion on this item. Is there any opposition to approval of this item?
Speak. Just speak. Mr. Chair.
Oh, sure. Mr. Constant?
Yeah, she's pressed into the queue, but it doesn't appear. Next time, just speak up, Jamie. Just. Hey.
Yeah, sorry, I don't see you. But go ahead, Ms. Allard.
That's okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I'm coming into the middle of all this, so I do have some questions. And I did hear Assemblywoman Kennedy say that she did get the answers that she requested. Could she please go over that email and explain to me what answers that she did get?
Sure. Ms. Kennedy, do you want to summarize the email, the questions and answers?
I believe I can do better than that and just kind of tell you what answers I got rather than trying to summarize it in my own words. But it was quite lengthy. I think most of the members would have gotten the same information or the same email. Let me see here if I can find it real quick. Actually, when I asked, this is the response that I got. The LeMay contract is a non-encumbering instrument that is used only when there is a need for temporary staffing, and the requirement for additional staff is vetted through human relations prior to any purchase orders being issued. The contract was competitively bid at the time, was bid in 2018. The estimated value was $500,000 per year with 3 one-year options, each option year at $500,000 per year for a total not to exceed an amount of $2 million if all options are exercised. The $500,000 per year was our best estimate at the time, and we did not expect the value to be exceeded based on the available information at the time of award. The amount of $1 million requested could be a lower amount, but purchasing felt the flexibility is needed to bring on additional staff if the situation warrants. The rate being charged by LeMay is competitive, and for non-federal emergency work is 17.5%, and I'm not exactly sure what that's in a reference to. But anyway, bottom line, again, the amount is not to exceed amount and will not be used if the situation does not warrant additional staff being required to respond to MOA requirements. So that was why I asked some of the questions that I did, because it does sound to me like we don't know if we need this yet. But I think what Mr. Haddon is saying is the opposite, is that we are at the end of what's previously been approved in this contract, and we have however many more months to go, I guess, in dealing with whatever the municipality would have to deal with for the rest of this year, and considering COVID impacts as well. So I guess the answer that I'm being given, and I can certainly be corrected if I'm wrong, but it sounds to me like the extra $500,000, which puts this contract way over the $2 million mark, is necessary for things that we are actually needing tomorrow, next week, next month. So, and I'm, certainly open to any other comments on that from staff. Thank you.
Thank you. Did you have any follow-up, Ms. Allard?
I do. So this probably will go to Mr. Hatter. He's in charge of the procurement of this, correct? Mr. Hatter, my question would be to you, if you can just explain to me, do you have like an actual job description that an individual do? I can just pull one out randomly. So I can just say, how about Temp Dana Lauti, Resource Stats Recorder for the EOC? It looks like here for 2 months worth of work, it's $13,818. What is she actually doing for that amount of money?
Sorry, could you repeat your question? Because sorry, I didn't get it. So your question, was it on this item that we have before us? Yes. Okay.
Repeat the question.
Yeah, if you could repeat the question, please.
No problem.
So, Mr. Hatter, here for the LeMay Engineering Consulting, I threw out a name and just randomly it's Temp Dana Lauti, Resource Stats Recorder for the EOC. And it looks like her dates would be 4/16/20 to June 13/20. Her income was going to be based on the amount paid was $13,818. Can you tell me what she's doing for that amount of money?
And your question was to Mr. Haddon? Okay. Mr. Haddon, do you have any response to that?
Yes, sir. I'm trying to work 2 different electronic media and not doing a very good job of it. But that particular person is assigned to the EOC, and I would have to defer to the EOC for exactly what their duties are. But let me explain how the contract works, and that may help. When there is a requirement, we will identify a resource to LeMay. We will provide LeMay a job description for that individual and the amount of money that we are willing to pay that individual per hour. Mr. LeMay then will bring that individual on board, will process the payroll, pay the insurance requirements, pay the FITWA and FICA on that individual, and provide them to the organization to perform the work for us. I'm not sure if that totally answers your question because I don't know the specifics of what that individual is doing at the EOC.
Can I do a follow-up?
Sure, and I guess just to reiterate, so we are on the LeMay contract. I think the questions that you're asking are on a different item when it comes to the specific individuals. But go ahead.
Part of the contract, am I not correct?
So I think you might be looking at a different item, but go ahead if you have a follow-up.
Yeah, I do. So we're here testifying on this, or we're here discussing this tonight. You're the procurement officer on it, but you don't have the answers that I'm looking for on it. Do you have any of the answers on what any of these fees and why they are so high broken down at all? I can throw out another example if that would help you.
I don't have specific information on what those individuals are doing unless I pull the specific purchase orders and look at the job descriptions that was provided to Mr. LeMay. The way the contract works is we are asking tonight for authority to issue additional purchase orders if there is a need for them. The question you are asking is about the exact duties of individuals that have already been contracted for.
Can I do a follow-up?
So I think just to clarify, and maybe the administration can help me out here because I'm having trouble finding. So the item that has the specific individuals, which item is that? If the administration can assist, because I think those are the questions that are being asked, are the item, which I think just might be 14A, I'm not sure, but the item that has the specific individuals, and that's not the item that we have before us. The item we have before us is the LeMay contract. But if you have one more follow-up on that, Ms. Allard, go ahead.
I just wanted to know what they're exactly doing. We have another individual here being paid $34,956 over a course of less than 30 days or exactly at 30 days, and I'm trying to figure out justification for paying someone $34,000. Are they bringing in a team? Is it just one person? Or are we saying, no, this individual who is providing critical care for the ICS functions to support the EOC is worth $34,956.25 from April 15th until May 14th? It doesn't look like, excuse me, Mr. Chair, that Mr. Hayden can answer my questions. So.
Mr. Chair, I see Mr. Wilbur in the queue.
Yeah, Mr. Wilbur.
Through the chair, Assemblymember Allard, I will do my best to answer your question in general, and then I'll be glad to get you some more specifics. But I think maybe Ms. Allard is referring to when Assemblymember Kennedy sent us the list of questions, and she had a couple individuals listed there. I'm not sure if Ms. Allard is referring to that list. Which are list of individuals under the LeMay contract. And we provided some information about the estimated salary for those individuals, or the estimated cost for those individuals over roughly a month period. That is to work basically 6 days a week, 12 hours a day, and at roughly $100 an hour. And as Mr. Haddon had mentioned, when we do this work out and we put it out to competitive bid, the hourly rate that we came up with a couple of these individuals was roughly about $100 an hour. So for 6 days a week, basically 12 hours a day. The exact tasks for each one of those and the duties and responsibilities, we don't have that information, but we can get that information. I do know that they are supporting either a team of logistics or operational individuals. We can get you some more detail if you have specifics about individual people. We could also do that for municipal employees as well. But if you have specifics for these contractors, we'd be glad to get that to you. But we don't have those answers for you, what they're exactly doing tonight. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Yeah, and thank you for that clarification on the questions from the email. That was helpful. Ms. Zalatel?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm just curious why we're getting this as a change order to a contract versus how we've seen the rest of the emergency operations expenditures come through and just in a separate report. Is there something specific to this situation that requires a different process?
Through the chair, I'll start, and then Mr. Haddon can jump in. Basically, we have an existing contract with a firm, and we're just asking that we add on to that existing contract for similar services. It's not a different set of services. It's the same services for an extended period of time. And as Mr. Haddon mentioned, we've met the extent to which they previously had authority to expend. They're basically out of money. They don't have the ability to spend any more money. We need to give them authority and money to do more. So that is why this request is presented this way. And if Mr. Haddon wants to correct or redirect, I'll welcome his additions. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Kennedy?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think my question's a little bit along those lines too, and a little bit on the lines of kind of the process here. But it appears to me that this contract was initially let at $500,000 and had renewal options up to $2 million. But we are adding an additional $1 million that will make it a $3 million contract. So, you know, you may need to correct me on that, but how is it that if a contract is supposed to go to $2 million that we can, just by changing it with this ordinance, make it a $3 million when that wasn't actually part of the original contract, or was it? Or was that actually an option to be able to go to the $3 million mark? Actually, $3,100,000, I think, to be exact.
Thank you. Mr. Haddon, do you want to answer that question? Mr. Haddon, want to answer that question? Mr. Haddon? I'm not sure if Mr. Haddon had to step off the line. Does someone from the administration have a response?
Oh, I guess I was on mute. I'm sorry.
Okay. Go ahead, Mr. Haddon.
This is no different than bringing forth another change order to the Assembly for approval, as I do not have the authority to increase that dollar amount of that contract unless I come to the Assembly and ask for that authority. Again, this is asking for authority to hire additional staff if and when needed. The dollar amount could be less than $1 million. We picked $1 million because of how much we've spent in the past 4 months, and I think all of us have a cloudy crystal ball at this point.
Thank you. All right, I don't see any further questions on this item. We'll go ahead and do a vote. So members may proceed to vote on this item.
Mr. Dunbar?
Yes.
Ms. Kennedy?
No.
Ms. Quinn Davidson?
Yes.
Mr. Perez-Verdia?
I think.
Okay. Mr. Weddleton?
Yes.
That item is approved 8-2. We now have before us item 9E2, AIM number 61-2020, reports from the administration regarding any emergency measures taken under the proclamation of emergency extended by Assembly Resolution AR 2020-85. What is the will of the body?
Move to accept.
Second.
Moved and seconded by Ms. Solotel. Ms. Kennedy, you pulled this one?
I did, thank you. And I just wanted some clarification on it. It just seems like we have the Dempsey Anderson set up for COVID patients, but we're not really using it. So I guess it's available but not active. And currently, though, there was a statement in the report that said that homeless who need isolation or quarantining are actually being put in hotels. So I guess my question is a couple questions, two things. Do we have people in those hotels now, or is that just an arrangement that can be made if we need them and we don't want to use the Dempsey Anderson Center? And then I guess at what point what would be the trigger that would then actually cause the Dempsey Anderson Center to be staffed and utilized? Thank you.
Thank you. Does someone from the administration want to respond?
Thank you. Through the chair, Chris Schutte, Director of Economic Community Development for Assemblymember Kennedy. So the mass isolation / quarantine facility, or the Dempsey Anderson Ice Arena, luckily doesn't have any guests staying at it currently. However, it is still mobilized and available for use. And part of the demobilization work or effort around that facility will be tied to the continuing positive public health trends that we're seeing in the community, and particularly among our population that's currently taking up residence at the mass shelter. As we're winding down our operations and beginning to see the public health metrics move in the right way, we begin to demobilize both, but the fear or the concern is that if we demobilize the mass quarantine isolation too quickly, and we do have some form of tick up the wrong direction, I guess, in the COVID outbreak, that we would need to have that facility on standby for quickly placing individuals inside of it. To your question about the individual units that are available for isolation quarantine, I don't have the population today that's in it. I can pull that for you and send it offline. It too has seen declining utilization, but again is not at a point. We are not at a point as in a community. In the community yet that we want to turn that off either. There is limited capacity available at the individual unit facility, and there was a preference for families and others who have unique needs that they don't end up in the Dempsey Anderson, they end up in the individual room accommodations first. And so we, at this point, wouldn't want to turn that one off either. But I can pull the population from last night and get it to you.
Some follow-up, please, Mr. Chair?
Sure, go ahead.
Okay, so again, kind of going to the idea of a trigger mechanism of some sort. So if we are able to take care of these situations with putting people in a hotel, at what point do we think we would actually have to staff and open Dempsey Anderson? Is there a number there that we're looking for, that we can handle people in the hotel situation for now, but at some point with some number we would have to move them into Dempsey Anderson, and what is that number? I'm still kind of looking for why we have both available, but we're really only saving one, using the other as the current preference.
Yeah, thank you. Good question through the chair, Assemblymember Kennedy. So the calculus that goes into when the demobilization of Dempsey Anderson can be fully ramped and the facility sanitized and returned to its previous form is a little more complex than just the numbers of people at the mass shelter or the people at the other facility. Keep in mind that overarching all of this is still the continued reduced functions and reduced numbers allowed for activities like sports, for gathering, things like that. So it's not an easy answer to say, yes, it will be once we hit this target, because in addition to the targets related to our sheltered individuals, we have to remember that there are overarching public health mandates from the state and criteria from the city on limiting gatherings, sporting events, and things like that. So it's not an easy answer to say this is when it will be returned to its previous use because of those various factors, but those are both of the large factors that play here.
All right, thank you, Mr. Schutte. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. All right, I don't see any other folks in the queue. Is there any opposition to acceptance of this item? Okay, seeing none, this item is accepted. All right, that takes us through the consent agenda. We are now on item 11A, Assembly Memorandum number AM 238-2020, approval of a vendor contract with the Alaska Railroad Corporation, contract number 5981 for remainder of contract term ending December 31st, 2033, in the amount of $3,575,000 to provide payment of inspection fees, maintenance, and repairs at railroad crossings for the municipality of Anchorage. Thank you. Madam Clerk, do we have a motion on the floor?
No motion pending.
Move to approve.
Is there a second? Moved and seconded. by Mr. Peterson. Any discussion on this item? Ms. LaFrance.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Questions for the administration to Mr. Wilbur. Were you able to get more information regarding the contract and what is driving the obligation for this specific contract?
Through the chair, Assemblymember LaFrance, yes, I was. As a matter of fact, I got a copy of the contract. I can send that to you. But basically, the requirements of the contract permit that the municipality to construct, operate, maintain any storm drains, signal crossings, any PED crossings, the road crossing itself across the railroad right-of-way, and any facilities within the right-of-way that are municipal properties. Any communications or poles or lights that we might have also inside that right-of-way.
Can I follow up? So how does this relate, if it does at all, to the railroad's exclusive use right? I'm trying to get an understanding of the legality, and just in some of the questions too that we had started to discuss before the meeting through email, when it pertains also to the kind of maintenance done at these crossings. I mean, is it the railroad track that is causing the road to degrade, or is it the road that causes the railroad track to degrade? That's another aspect of questions. But in terms of the driver of this, like the proprietary service agreement with the ARRC, what is that in regards to versus permit number 5981? I'm a little bit concerned because this specific contract will go to 2033, and we've had a number of questions and issues that have come up concerning what we do at these crossings and how much the muni pays. Sorry, that was probably several, I know that was several questions wrapped into one. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
Through the chair, I don't think I can answer all of those questions. If I have Mr. Robinson from Public Works Administration on the phone, I may ask him. Otherwise, I'm going to have to get back to you. I have some responses to questions I can forward to all of the assembly members if that's helpful, and you can come back to this item. I could do that.
Mr. Chair. Mr. Wilbur, when you say come back to, do you mean in this meeting or?
Yes, in this meeting.
Like later today? Okay.
Okay. Ms. Zolotel?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So my questions may have to be ones that we circle back to, but I don't have any point of comparison for this request. So it'd be great to know the prior term and the amount, because this has been pending since August 16, 2013. And then I guess I would like a little bit of information about why we do this and why we're going till the end of the contract through to 2033 versus some other term. So I need some kind of historical knowledge, please.
Through the chair, Assemblymember Zolotel, I don't have the answer to the historic, to the previous original contract, except that when we do these with the railroad, they are typically for about a 5 to 10 year window. This one's a little bit longer than that because there's no need to come back year after year. The facility is not changing. The responsibilities are not, they might get modified if there's new additions to them, but it's basically a municipal public facility crossing a railroad right-of-way, so there's really no other parties involved. It's just the cost of those things, or if we're going to add anything to them or take them away. So that is typically why the length of the terms of the contracts are this long.
Thank you. So we're just going to go ahead and move on, and that motion will be on the floor when we take this back up later today. So we now have before us item 11B, ordinance number AO 2020-21, an ordinance of the Anchorage Municipal Assembly amending Anchorage Municipal Code Chapter 3.80, civil emergency, to ensure that emergency powers can be exercised in the temporary absence or incapacity of the mayor or other delegated authority.
Wait, reading.
Thank you. Madam Clerk, what's the motion on the floor on this one?
The motion on the floor is to approve. Mr. Constant moved and Ms. Kennedy seconded that motion.
Okay, thank you. We have a motion to approve on the floor. Madam Vice Chair?
I'd like to move to postpone to the meeting of May 19th.
Second.
Moved and seconded by Mr. Constant. I guess I can speak to it.
Mr. Rivera.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. Rationale here is we will have a work session scheduled, I believe, on the 15th, in which we will go through some of the amendments. There were a variety of questions that I don't think would be very fruitful for us to attempt to dive into it here on the floor. So we'll have a work session to go into that and go through some of the details before this comes back to us.
Thank you, Mr. Rivera.
Thank you. Any further discussion on the motion to postpone to May 19th? Okay, seeing none, any opposition to postponement? Okay, seeing none, this will be back before us on the meeting of May 19th. With that, we're going to go ahead and take our, we don't have any appearance requests, so we're going to go ahead and take our 20-minute break and then be back to take up item 13A.
All right.
All right, so for folks on the phone, we're going to start in a minute. All right, so we're going to go ahead and get started again, and we're actually going to go back to item 11A. Some of the members should have gotten some more information in their email, and I think Mr. Wilbur and potentially someone else who will be joining us on the phone can answer any specific questions that Ms. LaFrance or others have. So, Ms. LaFrance, do you want to get started?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Oh, I see Mr. Wilbur is on the phone. So a question for Mr. Wilbur, and thank you for sending the contract. Could you, I haven't had a chance to go through it yet. Mr. Wilbur, could you walk us through it and what it includes?
What up? Through the chair, members of the assembly. So I did send out a copy, a PDF file of a contract that we have with the railroad. It's contract number 5981 that was also referenced in the email. And I'll just go to the first page at the very top. This agreement had initially started in 1990, and back then we were trying to figure out a mechanism in which we have situations where we have a public, municipally owned facility, primarily roadways is the purpose of this agreement, where we cross railroad property. So this, rather than come to the assembly for every single individual piece of operation that we might need on a roadway at a railroad crossing, we established this agreement initially back in 1990, and we've recommend that we make these changes. It's basically it's an ability where if we ask the railroad, or if the railroad does an inspection on a particular railroad crossing and they see that maybe a pole had been hit or a box or there was some damage at the crossing that affects public safety, the railroad will go in there and fix it, and then they will bill us for those types of improvements. And they could range from, as I mentioned earlier, they could be poles, pipes, wires, or anything like that. There also is going to be a situation where if we have a development that might occur where as part of the development we need to improve the safety of the crossing for a variety of reasons, or we want to make some improvements to pedestrian crossings primarily if we want to put gates or anything like that. We will have those as requirements potentially as part of development, either for a road or private development on property. And if there's a need to have improvements at the railroad crossing for safety reasons, we will determine what the improvements are. The railroad will do the improvements, and then they will bill us for those improvements. And again, this is specifically for things that we might require as a part of development that might influence a railroad crossing. So we kind of have two things going on. One is a maintenance thing. Rather than coming to the assembly for every little piece of work that we do, we create this blanket contract, or this blanket contract specifically for doing work at railroad crossings. So the reason we picked the amount of time was to sort of limit the amount of time that we would actually come back to the assembly. If the assembly wanted to make it a 5-year or a 7-year or a 10-year contract, I don't think that's going to inhibit our process. It's just going to be the timing which we come back. So that, in a nutshell, is what this contract is about. The type of work that we're doing is really no different. It's just that the current contract we have has met its term limits, and so we're looking to continue the same relationship we have with the railroad for basically the same purpose for the next 12 or 13 years. And I think Mr. Moy Robinson, who's the Director of Public Works Administration, he has some history on this as well, if I have not answered all of your questions. Thank you, Assemblymember LaFrance.
Thank you, Mr. Wilbur. Mr. Chair, may I continue? So just, I think I'm clear then, and thank you for that, Mr. Wilbur. The cost causer is the road, and this contract covers demand maintenance and anything else at the request of the municipality. And the terms have been negotiated between the two parties, obviously, and this is not a result of exclusive use easement, but rather a mechanism for addressing these issues, the ones that you identified.
Through the chair, Assemblymember France, I would concur with that, yes.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Mr. Weddleton? Mr. Weddleton, you're on mute. Okay, I'll come back to you.
I'm back, sorry.
All right, go ahead.
So, Mr. Wilbur, a few more questions. So, since the railroad is doing the work, are we vulnerable to the penalties in Section 7 and 8?
I'm refreshing my memory of 7 and 8.
Mr. Chair, just
Yes.
point of information, a question to Mr. Weddleton. You're looking at the contract? Is there an item?
Yes.
Sorry.
And that, did you find it?
Oh, towards the bottom? Small in my.
Well, then, thanks.
Like page 11 or so?
Section 8 is page 6 and 8. 6 and 7, I'm sorry. One is penalties on train delays, and it's $50 a minute minimum an hour. And then other one's damage to their communications.
Got it. Thank you. Mr. Wilbur?
And through the chair, Assemblymember Weddleton, your question was,
Well, I just wondering, the railroad is doing the work.
Right.
Would we be subject to these penalties if something goes awry?
I don't believe we do, Assemblymember Weddleton, but because right now the railroad would be doing the work inside the right-of-way, whether it's, or inside the road right-of-way, whether it's for maintenance or for construction. If they are not doing it properly, or there's an improvement for something that we were looking for, I suspect that there is going to be an inspection on the work that we're asking for, particularly if it's signal maintenance, and we're going to be responsible for maintaining it. But the quality of the work, I think, would rest with the railroad, since they are actually doing the work. If that,
One would think, I mean, on these, it's like if during the course of the work there's a train delay, that it says the permittee/contractor or its subcontractors, the penalty would be collected from the permittee/contractor by the ARRC. So they're doing the work, but if there's a delay caused by the work, by the way this is worded, we would have to pay this penalty. That doesn't seem fair to me. Similar in Section 8. So anyway, maybe no answer on that, but that seems important. And then a question, if I may, Chair, Mr. Chair.
Go ahead, Mr. Weddleton.
Okay. Another question. So where does the money for this come from? I know we bond for quite a bit, typically, it seems like annually, to do work like this.
Through the chair, Assemblymember Weddleton, you are correct. If we looking for improvements in the across the tracks for the purposes of roadway improvements and the ability to cross the tracks, we do use bond monies to pay for those capital improvements.
But for this maintenance, is that out of the operating budget or bond money?
For maintenance, if there's a down sign or something like that in the right of way and the railroad picks it up, then street maintenance would likely be paying for those improvements.
Okay, that makes sense. So, okay, and one last one, if I may.
Go ahead, Mr. Weddleton.
So it's just the term of this is fairly long, 13 years. I mean, there's some changes like in the permit fee and so on in Section 3, it's every 5 years. Did you consider just going 5 years?
Through the chair, Assemblymember Weddleton, are you saying in Section 3, did we consider adjusting the fees in stages in like every 5 years?
Well, no, I would do the whole thing in 5 years. I mean, 13 for this seems long. Instead, there's sections of it, including Section 3, that is revisited in 5 years. So it seems like just put the whole thing as just in 5-year periods.
Through the chair, Assemblymember Weddleton, we wouldn't have an objection to go, and if you guys wanted to look at it in 5 years, I don't think the administration would not object to doing that.
Okay, so how do you do that? Do we make a motion that we approve this for 5 years?
I think that it would be the request because part of the AAM for the contract would be out to 2033. So we would have to amend the
Mr. Chair.
amount not to exceed as well.
Point of order.
Sure, Mr. Constant.
If we're going to get down to this level of detail, is this an item that could be delayed to another day so we can move on with our business and do this in a thoughtful way?
Yeah, I agree. Mr. Weddleton, and unless the administration has an objection, could you make a motion to postpone this so that we can get a new item back to us with your requested change?
I'd be happy to. I'd move to postpone until May 19th.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any opposition? Mr. Constant, did you want to speak to that? Ms. LaFrance?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And just to Mr. Wilbur, this will not be a problem, will it, an additional 2 weeks?
Through the chair, no objections.
Thank you.
Okay, seeing no opposition, then that we'll see that back on the 19th. Moving on to item 13A, ordinance number AO 2020-36, an ordinance authorizing the disposal by a non-competitive property exchange of Heritage Land Bank parcel 3-076, legally described as Tract 6, Tudor Municipal Campus. I don't think we have anyone to testify on this item. Madam Clerk, do we have a motion on the floor for this one?
Mr. Chair, I would move to approve.
Second. Weddleton.
Right, but we don't have anyone. Yep. Okay, moved and seconded, Mr. Constant and Mr. Weddleton. Mr. Constant?
I just would move the original version.
Okay. Any amendments? I think we do have some.
Yes, Mr. Chair.
All right, so we have the Weddleton Zolotel Dunbar amendment.
I'd move Weddleton Amendment number 1. Weddleton Zolotel Dunbar.
Second.
Moved and seconded by Ms. Zolotel. Mr. Weddleton, you want to speak to it?
Yeah, I would. Thank you. This just clarifies some things. You know, this piece of land that the city owns and would trade for the Tozier Tract comes with a very important deed restriction, which is in the document. But it has an important feature that it be continued with appropriate public use. And what we've done is in this amendment is add just some whereases to guide the discussion as this process moves towards the conditional use process. And it states, actually in the last one, that there will be a good public outreach. And then it clarifies in the first one that that there will be accommodation for some kind of public use within the without interfering with the Dog Mushing Association's mission. And actually, the last 4 or 5 lines there is actually straight out of the ASDRA's mission and their bylaws. And it makes clear in the second whereas that they can certainly fence off and lock and protect any of the assets that they need to do to meet their mission. So it's fairly light guidance, but it is just intended to be respectful of that condition that goes with the deed restriction.
Thank you. Ms. Zolotel?
Sorry, if I might add briefly, we had a long phone meeting with the several people on the board of ASDRA on this past Thursday, and I think we were pretty close. We have kind of a meeting of the minds on here. However, they sent an email today after working on it for several days and said they would prefer not to have these whereases added.
Thank you. Ms. Zolotel?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm going to speak to the last whereas. What I think has become apparent to me and probably to a lot of other members as we've received communications from the community is that, excuse me, this area, there's kind of 2 things. One, a lot of folks believe that this is part of the parkland, and it is not. It is a separate parcel. So to provide that clarification, and that the only other parcel in this vicinity that is not designated parkland is over behind the state crime lab. So there's no concern in terms of like the park going away or being developed. But there are a lot of users of this area, formal and informal, and really we want to make sure that they are aware of the plan, that they're involved in the conversation to hopefully prevent subsequent tensions or objections later. We're hoping this can be a collaborative process because this is a well-used area. And we want to make sure that all the user groups can enjoy the area, but in a way that will respect ASDRA's investment. Thanks.
Thank you. All right, I'm not seeing anyone else in the queue on the amendment. Members may proceed to vote.
Yes.
Ms. Kennedy?
Yes.
Ms. Quinn Davidson?
Yes.
Mr. Perez Verdia?
Yes.
Mr. Weddleton?
Yes.
That amendment passes 11-0. I think next amendment we have Weddleton-Zolotel Amendment number 2.
Weddleton moves amendment number 2.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Do you want to speak to it, Mr. Weddleton?
This is actually, our names are on this, but this is totally about Dean catching a citation error and just corrects it.
Okay. I don't see any discussion on this amendment. Is there any opposition to this amendment? Okay. Seeing no opposition, then that amendment is approved. Any other amendments on this item? Okay, I don't see any discussion on this item.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, Mr. Weddleton?
I support this, and this trade has been something that's been in the works for many, many years. And it will create, it opens up some land that will be very valuable for the Tudor Elmore development. But equally important is this piece of land is absolutely spectacular, and it will make an amazing place for the start of sled dog races and the other activities that the Sled Dog Racing Association has allowed for use on lands, like the Ren Fair and so on. So it's a much better location for them. Dog mushing is a really important activity in Alaska and in Anchorage. So I'm really excited to see what this group will do with this piece of land. This is a great thing, really. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, I don't see any further discussion on this item. Members may proceed to vote.
Mr. Dunbar?
Yes.
Ms. Kennedy?
Yes.
Ms. Quinn Davidson?
Yes.
Mr. Perez Verdia?
Yes.
Mr. Weddleton?
Yes.
That item passes 11-0. We now have before us item 14A, Emergency Order Number EO 2020-4, an emergency ordinance providing financial resources for labor, supplies, and other expenditures required to address municipal response to coronavirus disease 2019 by appropriating an amount not to exceed $10 million from an interfund loan from the area-wide general fund to the COVID-19 fund. Approving.
Safe reading.
Thank you. Okay, so I think we do have one individual to participate in testimony. Okay.
Yes, Mr. Chair, we're going to call Eugene Haberman.
Welcome, Mr. Haberman. We are on testimony. Mr. Haberman? Welcome. We are on testimony on Emergency Ordinance EO 2020-4. Mr. Haberman, can you hear me?
Hello? Hello? Can you hear me?
I can hear you, yes. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay. Welcome, Mr. Haberman. We are on emergency ordinance number EO 2020-4. You will have 3 minutes.
Yeah, okay, I start my clock. Okay, okay, go ahead.
Go ahead, sir.
Okay, thank you. Best wishes to everybody in these difficult times. My name is Eugene Carl Haberman. I represent myself. I follow the public process. When the public process is done appropriately, the decision made by the governing body is more like in the public interest. What I'm going to speak today on this issue is concerned. As you all know, I monitor meetings. Part in reference to this issue, I listened to the tape of the meeting dealing with the Budget Assembly Committee today. It happened on the 30th. It has made reference to what's before you tonight. But the fact is, there was like a 5-minute gap in that tape, about 39 minutes in that tape. It reminds me of Watergate, the famous gap of the tape when what happened to those famous minutes that was cut off. On vital discussion on dealing with the budget, and you got 5 minutes of a recording that doesn't exist. And the public cannot hear on that matter. I open with that comment there. And when you called me just now, I'm with the Borough Assembly right now. And it's amazing because I attend Anchorage and Borough Assembly meetings to hear the conversation of monies. This is appropriation dealing with $10 million. But you have an S version in there that got laid on the table. Where is that, and where's a fair chance for the public to engage in what's that about? That's not the way to go. That's not fair process. And for the public who doesn't know what laid on the table means, it means was put on the agenda tonight and voted tonight to be on the agenda, and it's an item that they're asking for public testimony on that issue now. So how do you carry that? I worry about the issue is when I was listening to the budget meeting of the Assembly on the 30th that I heard, answers the questions that needed to be answered dealing with the CARE Act, the monies that were going to come or will be able to Anchorage to get, okay, or apply for, were in question. They weren't there for last Thursday. So how do you go about and approve monies at this game? Now, I also like to remind you of also a thing about the budget and monies. It was about a month ago, before the emergency order went out, you had approved a major loan of $100 million or whatever to put the city in debt, and the obligation of that loan will be paid back by property tax. I raised the issue, and you did it anyway. So when you're talking about money,
Mr. Haberman,
come in here, and you don't bring out that
Mr. Haberman,
roughly out there.
Your time is up, Mr. Haberman.
Approved. So that concludes my time, and I all wish you the best. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. I do not believe we have anyone else to testify on this item. Public testimony is closed. What is the will of the body?
Move to approve.
Second.
Moved and seconded by Ms. Salatel. Ms. Quinn-Davidson?
I'd like to move to change the order of the day to take this item up following 14I.
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Constant.
Thank you, Mr. Constant. The reason, Mr. Chair, is that my understanding is that the administration is working on some potential changes to this document, so they just need a little bit more time.
Thank you. Any opposition to changing the order of the day to take this up after 14I? Okay. Seeing none. I'll just wait another second. Okay. Then we'll go ahead and take that up after we take up the other 14 items. We now have item 14B, ordinance number AO 2020-39, an ordinance amending the zoning map and approving the rezoning of approximately 1.7 acres from PLI SL with special limitations per AO 2020-106S to B3 for tracks G5 and G6. Athenian Village subdivision per plat 83-62. Generally located north of East Tudor Road, east of Florino Street, south of Residential Drive, and west of Elmore Road in Anchorage.
Waive reading.
Thank you. I do not believe we have anyone to testify on this item. Public testimony is closed. What is the will of the body?
Move to approve.
Second.
Moved and seconded by Mr. Weddleton. Any discussion on this item?
Weddleton would like to say I'm recognized.
Sure, go ahead, Mr. Weddleton.
Thank you. This is amazing. I mean, so excited to see that we will be, there's someone, the South Central Foundation, and will be developing more recovery services there. It's so desperately needed. This is just fantastic to have this little step in that direction.
Thank you. All right, I'm not seeing any other discussion on this item. Members may proceed to vote.
Mr. Dunbar?
Yes.
Ms. Kennedy?
Yes.
Ms. Quinn Davidson?
Yes.
Mr. Perez-Verdilla?
Yes.
Mr. Weddleton?
Yes.
That item is approved 11-0. The next items on the agenda involve applications for a liquor or a marijuana license and or a special land use permit for alcohol or marijuana. The process to review these items is different than the Assembly's legislative role because these are administrative or quasi-judicial hearings and require the Assembly to be impartial, refrain from ex parte communications, except in liquor license applications, and make a decision based only on the record before us and testimony today. So the next item we have is item 14C, resolution number AR 2020-134, a resolution of the Anchorage Municipal Assembly stating its conditional protest regarding the renewal of restaurant eating place liquor license number 5610 for the Writers Block DBA, the Writers Block Bookstore and Cafe.
Waive reading.
Thank you.
Waive reading.
Thank you. I believe we have one individual to testify. Okay.
Hello.
Hi, welcome. This is Felix Rivera. You're with the Anchorage Assembly. We are doing public testimony for item 14C regarding the renewal of the Writers Block Bookstore and Cafe liquor license.
Yes, I'm here.
Yeah, you'll have 3 minutes to testify. Go ahead.
Okay, hi. Thank you very much for allowing me to chime in on this. My name is Vera Morris. I'm one of the owners of the Writers Block Bookstore and Cafe. And we have a bill for our unpaid liquor license taxes. We've attempted to pay the bill. However, we kind of got stuck with some financial difficulty due to COVID, and then we also had trouble getting through to the municipality to arrange for payment for that payment. I sent a series of emails back and forth. But effectively, we would like to be able to pay it and make arrangements to pay it so that we can move forward and eventually reopen.
Okay, thank you so much for your testimony. I'm not seeing any questions, but you'll probably want to stay on the line for when we get to deliberation.
Sure.
I don't think we have anyone else to testify, so public testimony is closed. What is the will of the body?
Move to approve.
Is there a second? Okay, seconded by Ms. Quinn Davidson. Any discussion on this item? Sure. So I have a couple folks in the queue, and then maybe Mr. Gates can explain this item as well. Ms. Kennedy?
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chair, and maybe Mr. Gates will actually explain everything well enough, but I guess my question is if we approve this, there's still the problem with the license not being approved until the condition of having paid taxes is met. So I'm kind of curious as to really where that puts us and what kind of mechanism we actually have maybe at our disposal to approve a license, allow them to keep operating should they, should we be reopening places like this soon, really what is the effect of just approving it? What does that actually accomplish when there's still a question of taxes being owed? Thanks.
Thanks. Mr. Gates?
Thank you. So I'll try to explain as best I can. First, I would clarify that we're not approving this license. This is the state's liquor license. The Assembly, as the local governing body, our role is to say we protest the state ABC board approving this license renewal. If we have grounds to do so, like it's not a safe operation, they violate the law, they get a lot of police responses, or they haven't paid their taxes. So the state regulations have a provision that says when a local governing body protests based on some conditions that the ABC board can approve with a 180-day abeyance period, and that 180-day abeyance period allows the licensee to meet the conditions that the local governing body asked for in terms of meet those conditions, and then we lift our protest. So we're protesting because they owe taxes, and when this goes to the ABC board, we'll report that it's conditional protest until the taxes are paid. They would have about 180 days to pay those taxes for our protest to be lifted. If the ABC board goes along with that, which they normally do for this kind of circumstance. I hope that helps clarify.
Thank you. Do you have any follow-up, Ms. Kennedy?
Actually, I do have another question. I don't know if this is actually probably not for Mr. Gates, but it might be for the owner or somebody else in the meeting. But I was just curious as to what the roadblock was with being able to make the payment with the Muni, if that was some kind of a process breakdown with online payments or something that had to do with the payment office being closed, or anyway, I guess I was looking for maybe some more explanation of why there was a problem with actually making the payment through or to the municipality. Thank you.
Thank you. If we have the owner on the phone still, do you want to respond to that question?
Sure, yeah. So part of the problem was that earlier, over a month ago, a lot of the communication was not sent directly to me, so we were a little bit late in getting some of the communications. Once that was discovered, and then once again when I received this particular notice here, it seemed like because a lot of the municipal offices are either closed and folks are working from home, that my call to ask for help was replied with email, but not an avenue to actually get through to figure out the payment. I was unable to navigate an online ability to pay that, even though I've searched quite a bit. So if somebody wants to send me a link, I'd be happy to click on it and pay it. So it was really just, I think, a matter of bad timing and then actually not having people in the offices during their normal operating schedule so that we couldn't actually get that paid. And I think if you have the emails that I sent back and forth, I was getting a response, but not the ability to actually pay the bill, if that makes sense.
Oh, thank you. That's very helpful, actually. And I don't know, Mr. Chair, maybe the administration could respond to that hiccup in the process if they're aware of that even. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sure.
Does anyone from the administration want to respond?
Through the chair, I'll start, and then Mr. Schutte can jump in. I'm not aware of a hiccup. I know that we have been open for business, but there may have been a time when a bill was trying to get paid, and we just missed each other. So that could be the case. But to the operator, if there was if there was a time or a particular request that was made and we did not respond, that would be good to know as well. And I think Mr. Schutte can help us as well. Thank you.
Through the chair, Ms. Kennedy actually can't help you. I was going to say pretty much everything that Mr. Wilbur said. City Hall is actually still staffed by many members of Treasury, Property Appraisal, and other departments. Not everyone is not working from home, and I think the majority of people have automatically forwarded all phones to their own cell phones, et cetera. So I don't believe that COVID or the new telework policy should result in people not being available or able to answer phone calls or emails. But the takeaway being that obviously we have a customer service snafu that we hope to rectify right away.
Great, thank you. Appreciate that. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Ms. Quinn Davidson?
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to thank Vered for calling in and also for her amazing business that she started with her partners. That's really been something special in Spenard, and I know folks come from all different parts of town. So we're sorry this happened, and thank you for everything you're doing. And I think that this just underscores a lot of what, a lot of members have been talking about, the need for small businesses to really get the assistance, like some of the things Mr. Weddleton has talked about, potential changes in inventory tax or other things. So I appreciate you calling in, Vered, and all of the members for trying to help small businesses during this tough time.
Thank you very kindly for listening and for hearing my concerns, and hopefully we can get this taken care of within a couple of days.
Thank you. Mr. Constant?
Never mind, actually. I thought that the document said that the taxes were paid in full, but that appears there's another amount, and that's fine. That's what we do with these conditional protests, is allow the clerk to do their work. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, I'm not seeing anyone else in the queue. Members may proceed to vote.
Mr. Dunbar?
Yes.
Ms. Kennedy?
Yes.
Ms. Quinn Davidson?
Yes.
Mr. Perez Verdilla?
Yes.
Mr. Weddleton?
Yes.
That item is approved 11-0.
Mr. Chair, just a quick point to the speaker, if she's still on the phone. I'm glad you decided to stay open.
Thank you. Thank you. Much appreciated.
Thank you. Have a good rest of your evening.
You too. Thank you.
We now have before us item 14D, resolution number AR 2020-135, resolution of the Anchorage Municipal Assembly stating its conditional protest regarding the renewal of distillery liquor license number 5613 for Alaskan Spirits LLC DBA Alaskan Spirits Distillery.
Waive reading.
Thank you. We do not have anyone to testify on this item. Public testimony is closed. What is the will of the body?
Move to approve.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion on this item? Ms. Zolotel.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I had asked via email, this item all the way through the remaining licenses before us all suggest that they still need certification from the building safety official. I was kind of wondering why that's showing up and as not having been received, if it's related to the current emergency or something else that's going on.
Through the chair, Ms. Zolotel, short answer is no. I mean, it's fairly common in the protest pieces that you get at the assembly that there are missing elements of review and or fees and taxes paid. In this case, the reviews include everybody from the state fire marshal to the health department to our own fire department and building safety, land use enforcement, and planning. So it's not uncommon that there are outstanding items for any given licensee whose license is before you and being conditionally protested.
Thank you. All right, I'm not seeing any other folks in the queue. Members may proceed to vote.
Mr. Dunbar?
Yes.
Ms. Kennedy?
Yes.
Ms. Quinn Davidson?
Yes.
Mr. Perez Verdilla,
Yes.
Mr. Weddleton.
Yes.
That item passes 11-0. We now have before us item 14E, resolution number AR 2020-136, a resolution of the Anchorage Municipal Assembly stating its conditional protest regarding the renewal of distillery liquor license number 5462 for Anchorage Distillery LLC, Anchorage DBA Anchorage Distillery.
Waive reading.
Thank you. I don't think we have anyone to testify on this item. Public testimony is closed. What is the will of the body?
Move to approve.
Moved and seconded by Ms. LaFrance. Any discussion on this item? Seeing none, members may proceed to vote.
Mr. Dunbar,
Yes.
Ms. Kennedy,
Yes.
Ms. Quinn Davidson,
Yes.
Mr. Perez Verdilla,
Yes.
Mr. Weddleton.
Yes.
That item is approved 11-0. We now have before us item 14F, resolution number AR 2020-137, a resolution of the Anchorage Municipal Assembly stating its conditional protest regarding the renewal of restaurant eating place liquor license number 5637 for TNC Dynasty LLC DBA Seoul Casa.
Waive reading.
Thank you. Public testimony.
I think it's Sol Casa.
Seoul Casa, excuse me. I don't think we have anyone to testify on this item. Public testimony is closed. What is the will of the body?
Move to approve.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion on this item? Seeing none, members may proceed to vote.
Mr. Dunbar,
Yes.
Ms. Kennedy,
Yes.
Ms. Quinn Davidson,
Yes.
Mr. Perez Verdilla,
Yes.
Mr. Weddleton.
Yes.
That item is approved 11-0. We now have before us item 14G, resolution number AR 2020-138, a resolution of the Anchorage Municipal Assembly stating its conditional protest regarding the renewal of brewery liquor license number 5359 for Clap Liquid Industries LLC DBA Cynosure Brewing. We don't have any. Thank you. We don't have anyone to testify on this item. Public testimony is closed. What is the will of the body?
Move to approve.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion on this item? Seeing none, members may proceed to vote.
Mr. Dunbar,
Yes.
Ms. Kennedy,
Yes.
Ms. Quinn Davidson,
Yes.
Mr. Perez Verdilla,
Yes.
Mr. Weddleton.
Yes.
That item is approved 11-0. We now have before us item 14H, resolution number AR 2020-139, a resolution of the Anchorage Municipal Assembly stating its conditional protest regarding the renewal of restaurant eating place liquor license number 5165 for AK Fresh Seafood LLC DBA AK Fresh Seafood Bubbly Mermaid.
Waive reading.
Thank you. We don't have anyone to testify on this item. Public testimony is closed. What is the will of the body?
Move to approve.
Move to approve.
Seconded by Mr. Dunbar. Any discussion on this item?
Yes, Mr. Chair. Just
Mr.
briefly, if you have not been to the Bubbly Mermaid, I highly recommend it. It might be one of the most unusual establishments in town.
Thank you, Mr. Constant. Seeing no one else in the queue, members may proceed to vote.
Mr. Dunbar,
Oh, yes.
Ms. Kennedy,
Yes.
Ms. Quinn Davidson,
Yes.
Mr. Perez Verdilla,
Yes.
Mr. Weddleton.
Yes.
That item is approved 11-0. We now have before us item 14I, resolution number AR 2020-140, resolution of the Anchorage Municipal Assembly stating its conditional protest regarding a new restaurant eating place liquor license number 5892 and restaurant designation permit for Corks and Hops LLC DBA Corks and Hops.
Waive reading.
Thank you. We don't have anyone to testify on this item. Public testimony is closed. What is the will of the body?
Move to approve.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion on this item? Seeing none, members may proceed to vote.
Mr. Dunbar?
Yes.
Ms. Kennedy?
Yes.
Ms. Quinn Davidson?
Yes.
Mr. Perez Verdilla?
Yes.
Mr. Weddleton?
Yes.
That item is approved 11-0. We're now back to item 14A. We got a new document from the administration. Can someone from the administration walk us through this, please?
Certainly, Mr. Chair. This is Jason Bockenstedt. And the two big changes that are in the S1 version move the total dollar amount that is requested through this emergency appropriations ordinance from $10 million to $12 million. The first change is we would like to create a small business stabilization fund to help support small businesses financially impacted. We're obviously committing $1 million to this to support the first round. The way that we are envisioning this grant program being administered is small businesses can apply. It would serve up to 100 eligible small businesses chosen by lottery. They would receive $10,000 in the form of a grant. Some of the eligibility criteria that we are discussing include that to be eligible to apply, you have to have not received any other federal assistance, to include the PPP or the EIDL, the two most commonly known programs right now for small businesses. There are some restrictions on the amount of annual gross revenue that the small businesses have, as well as the number of employees. And you also have to show that you experienced a loss of income due to COVID-19.
Thank you.
Well, I was going to say the second piece of this, the second $1 million, is to create a rental relief assistance fund for those that are experiencing job loss and can no longer afford to pay their rent or things like that. As just a quick point of reference, we have talked to a number of organizations that do provide this sort of service. One of them in particular has 75 individuals just on a wait list. And we are receiving upwards or north of 50 calls per day to 211 asking for this type of assistance. So both of these programs are obviously things that we have heard about from the administration repeatedly from residents here in Anchorage, as I'm sure every member of the Assembly has as well. And I will just quickly point out that both of these funds are programs that are clearly laid out within the current Treasury guidance as allowable expenses from whatever funding we receive from the CARES Act. They are specifically laid out in there. So that is where we would envision being reimbursed from this. And obviously, again, this is a small dip in the bucket to what probably the overall need is, but we wanted to try to get funding into both small businesses and residents' hands as each day that passes, I know there's more and more concern. This does not take away from the fact that I know that the administration and the Assembly are going to have very long and detailed conversations about what we want to ultimately accomplish with the larger infusion that is hopefully on its way from the state. But this is what we believe is a good start into two big priority areas. So happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Before we go into the queue, Madam Clerk, can you remind me what the motion is on the floor?
Let me double check one more place.
Yeah, I thought we had before we moved.
Okay. No, Mr.
So, Mr. Chair, I would move the S1 version.
Moved by Mr. Constant, seconded by Ms. Quinn Davidson. All right, I'll go ahead and go down the queue now, starting with Ms. Solotel.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. A question, please, Mr. Bockenstead. Why the $10,000 grants? Why not have it distribute grants not to exceed $10,000? I could see some micro businesses out there that are really hurting, who probably don't need $10,000, but could certainly keep afloat if they were able to access some of this money.
I may phone a friend and ask Chris Schutte to talk about that a little bit.
Thank you. Through the chair, Assemblymember Zolotel, that's actually an excellent question. And so in evaluating what the options could be for providing small business assistance, we, of course, do what we usually do, which is look at what best practices we're seeing in other Alaska communities as well as across the country. There's nothing magical about the $10,000 number other than it's a commonly accepted threshold for small business support to provide them the cushion that they need for up to 8 weeks, and it encompasses typical things like rent, payroll, paying past due vendors, things like that. Could a smaller amount be valuable to a small business? Absolutely. But I would hazard a guess that because this criteria is tied to people who were not recipients of federal aid, it is more than likely that these are small businesses that have been postponing bills and other mounting costs for at least the past 35 days, if not longer. So I think that $10,000, even for a small two-person shop that does $250,000 a year in gross revenue, still will be very meaningful and needed at this point. If you wanted to move it to a smaller amount, I do think that the value would be less for many of the businesses, and we probably wouldn't see the uptick that we expect from this. But that's the other key point that Mr. Bockenstadt pointed out, which is this is a pilot program, which is why we're asking for $1 million only to get it started and get it stood up. Part of this experiment is to understand the need in the business community right now, and if, for example, $10,000 is not enough, or if the threshold on number of employees is too low, too high. There's a lot of unknown variables right now, and there is certainly no specific right answer for Anchorage because our small business community from Girdwood to Peters Creek comes in many different flavors, shapes, and sizes.
May I ask a follow-up? So I'm thinking about some small businesses that are really just like a single person, sole proprietor type situations. Would those, and actually I'm thinking of like people who provide music lessons of all things. It's the one that comes to mind. Those folks it may be like kind of a second gig for them. So I'm just trying to see how this works within, how fluid this is.
Yeah, through the chair, Assemblymember Zolotel, the program is currently envisioned, and in fact, the standard practice that we've seen in every community we've looked at across this country actually precludes sole proprietorships, simply because it is hard to justify public monies that get the greatest bang for the buck when it's going to a sole proprietor. Keep in mind that part of this is to get money in the pockets of people who are potentially out of work because their employer had to lay them off. And so for this program, it is geared towards employees of 2 to 7 people. So it's really targeted at a small business scale, but does preclude sole proprietorships. The other thing that I'm sure I'll get kicked for at some point if I don't bring up specifically, this does not preclude small businesses that are not for profit. So nonprofits many of whom function as a business but are not for profit, would be eligible to put their name in the hat for this as well.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Ms. LaFrance.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Actually, I was going to ask about
the method by which it was decided to disperse the funds and about how many businesses were expected to be out there seeking assistance, but I think that's already been addressed, so I'm good. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Weddleton.
Oh, thanks. So, Mr. Schutte, this is a pilot, so where would you anticipate it going, say, in the next month or 2 months? You know?
Through the chair, Assemblymember Weddleton, if you mean where is it going in the sense of how successful it will be, I think it will be. I think it's badly needed in the business community now. I do think that the burn rate on this money will be quick. That we will see a large number of applicants. We've already seen a preview of that with some of the numbers that have come out on the federal aid side, where people have applied in record numbers. So my thinking is this will very quickly tell us what the need is like, what the capacity for the business community is like, and will help us plan and prepare for how to perhaps ramp up a program that reaches deeper and further into the business community to provide that support.
Okay, if I may. So in a few months, you might, are other places doing like following with $5 million or $10 million and doing more, adjusting it a little bit?
Yeah, through the chair, it's a mixture for sure, because depending on the community, there are different fund sources for this. One example I can use is Washington State, Seattle. Their funding was initially a pot of CDBG money. They burned through $2.5 million in less than 13 days. They turned around and have started applying some of the additional CARES Act CDBG funding to a new tranche for a phase 2 of the program. I don't know yet how much bigger that one will be, but I think by and large, depending on the funding source, most people are seeing a lot of need for this and are looking at further tranches of funding. And that would include us.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Constant?
Yeah, thanks. I previously had heard that the money wouldn't go, the rent assistance money wouldn't go into the hands of renters. What's the process or your thoughts on how that's supposed to work?
This is Jason Backenstead, through the chair, Assemblymember Constant. The way that we are currently envisioning it is the way that it is currently set up through the United Way, and they work with a number of additional partners. Essentially, the way that it works is an individual call and say, I need rental assistance. They will go through the process of, asking questions and figuring out, is there maybe a different tranche of funding that might be available? If not, then we'll get to this. The way that the payment actually works is the individual actually never sees any of the money. It goes directly to whoever their landlord is, or in the instance of a mortgage, it will go directly to the bank. If that's how it's worked out.
Yeah, so just to put it again, reiterate it, if these funds are appropriated, the monies aren't going to be kind of used for any other purpose other than exactly rent or some kind of relief directly. Thank you.
Correct.
Thank you. Ms. Kennedy?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to talk about the business grants, the $1 million for the $10,000 business grants. I might be thinking too far down the road on this one, but one of the questions I have is how complicated could this get, and what would be the intent of these grants if we're to somewhere down the road decide that we're going to offer some kind of tax relief on inventory taxes or whatever we might do for businesses? How would this money offset those other tax relief efforts, or would it, or what's the conversation been about how those things might coordinate?
Through the chair, yes, Assemblymember Kennedy, great question. Much like the patchwork of federal stimulus opportunities available to small business, any additional stimulus measures will be designed to work in concert with the existing programs. I think the focus of the grant program that we're proposing, and I would suspect future programs as well, will really be to try and fill the gaps that exist out there now, whether it's through federal, state, or local opportunities, if there are ways that we're missing, say, certain aspects of small business ownership or certain sectors, to try and target any future relief monies in such a way that we're able to make sure that no one gets left behind.
Okay, if I could follow up, Mr. Chair. Then.
Go ahead.
Thank you. So the intent would be that if somebody were to take advantage of this particular grant program, this pilot program, that wouldn't necessarily preclude them from being able to receive other funding mechanisms or other tax relief measures that the municipality might come up with.
Through the chair, Assemblymember Kennedy, no, at this time we haven't set any artificial limits on further or future programs as a result of receiving this one. The only limit that's in place now, and again, this is just a pilot program to understand what the demand is out there, but the only limits that are placed on this program currently are the limits around you can't be a recipient of existing federal stimulus dollars, which I think sounds fairly reasonable. And then because this is targeted to what we hope are small neighborhood businesses across the municipality, there are the employee limits included and the gross annual revenue limits included. It's designed really to try and target that demographic, but those are the only limitations currently proposed.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Schuette. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Ms. Allard.
Hi. So I have a couple of questions, and I guess Mr. Schuette. Thank you. So we're talking to the small businesses, and we don't want them to be double dipping, getting stimulus. I can't do this. Getting stimulus money from the federal government, and we'll compensate by doing it through this program. So my question would be, how are you monitoring to make sure that they aren't double dipping?
Yeah, good question. Thank you. So through the chair, Assemblymember Allard, the check on a stimulus recipient at this point, don't let the secret out, but it's very hard to do. That being said, we know that both SBA and the federal government treasury will be making that information available publicly, the recipients of PPP and EIDL loans, et cetera. They've been very upfront about that. I have not seen the SBA rosters published yet, nor the treasury rosters published, but they are forthcoming. The approach that we are preferring with this is that we're going to put some trust in applicants. There are a number of other criteria that they have to satisfy where they will have to submit proof, and we can start there. But when it comes to the question of have they received or not received an SBA loan or a PPP grant, we are going to, of course, inform them that we have the right and the ability to audit later, which we plan to do, but that we're going to accept their good faith. If they say we did not receive and they check the box, then that counts as an affidavit. And if we find out later that it's different, we reserve the right to get the money back.
I have another question. Okay, and then there's nothing really, if they do come and get that money for their small business, that's potentially they could actually, after the fact, apply.
Yeah, so through the chair, that currently could happen, except that I think we will see both of the federal stimulus programs run out or close out around the same time this starts. So I don't think that we could reasonably have the municipal program up and running for applications any sooner than next week, and even that is going to be a miracle of some sort. And I think at the burn rate we're seeing now in round 2 of PPP or EIDL loans, it's going to be gone at the end of this week.
Okay, and I have another question for you. So when you say you've got you want to do it in a lottery, which I think is great, but where are we hearing the information that folks, I guess I want to know is, why aren't they applying for it? Are they worried that the funds are running out like we hear and those kind of things?
Yeah, through the chair, Assemblymember Allard, we've heard a variety of stories on people's frustrations with trying to take advantage of the federal stimulus programs out there. They range from anything from it's just overwhelming, it's too much work, it's too much paperwork, to they got started too late, and the first rounds went fairly quickly, and a lot of businesses lost out. There's also a number of our small businesses that we enjoy that are relatively underbanked, and they just don't have the access to the banking institutions that they need to take advantage of those programs. So there's a number of factors as to why small businesses can't or have not taken advantage of it.
And then the things that, for example, that we're not reimbursed on by the federal government are the CARES Act. It is possible that the taxpayers will in turn have to pick up what we don't get reimbursed from this.
Yeah, through the chair, absolutely. There's no secret to that. This is something that we anticipate backfilling with CARES Act monies. If for any reason the CARES Act doesn't show up, it shows up with strings that say you can't do it for this purpose. This is a $1 million grant program that will be carried by property owners.
One last thing, if anybody on this assembly, I don't know if this is something that people don't normally say, if you can convince me otherwise to vote for this, because I am worried about that. We are in a situation where nobody could really afford anything, especially to make their taxes go up. So I am open to hear more about it, but I'm really concerned it's going to fall back on our property tax, our property owners. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Zoloto?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. On the provision for rental assistance, I would like to propose an amendment on line 41. At the end of the word program, add the words and related outreach on how to access rental assistance.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Ms. Quinn Davidson. Ms. Zoloto?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So this is just really to make sure that we have a piece in here for related outreach so folks know how to access 211, the 211 program. I've done some, since the time that we've had this in front of us, cyber sleuthing through the 211 website. It's not the clearest. If you go through the website, it will actually take you to other service providers. So if it's really a phone-based request, I would really like us to make sure that we're not sending people down rabbit holes. By the time you get to where you need help, we need clear referrals, clear information. And the great thing is when you call, it's really quite accessible to a lot of different languages. Really, that's probably the most accessible way. But if that's the way we're expecting people to access it, we need to let them know that because websites are usually the default.
Thank you. Mr. Buckenstad, did you want to speak to the amendment or another issue?
Another issue.
Okay, I'll leave you in the queue then. Mr. Peterson on the amendment.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I was just going to say that $1 million will reverberate around the economy and create 4 or 5 times that amount in economic activity. And so the $10,000 may only help a small business for a couple of weeks, but the millions of dollars being added to our economy will activate other portions of the economy as well. So thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Constant on the amendment.
Yeah, thank you. I'm not sure that I support it, but I have a question first. The question I have to the administration is, what is the method by which you currently either envision or know that these programs are marketed? The reason why I don't know that I want to support the amendment or not is that $1 million in assistance is a very small pool of money in the big picture, and I think as much as we can direct exactly to the issue, which is the relief, probably the better. So my question really is, what is the way that this gets marketed currently or promoted?
Through the chair, Assemblymember Constant, the way that it is currently marketed is through 211 and United Way's website and, the other organizations, either websites or phone numbers that, individuals, either get referred to or know about in terms of being able to get some sort of rental assistance.
So if I might, then a question to the mover, what kind of sum of money are you thinking to take away from the $1 million for the purposes of communications?
Thank you, Mr. Constant. minimal, just enough to get the word out, whether that's through using a lot of the ways. I mean, it could be social media posts, whatever, just that it calling 211. When I search rental assistance, Anchorage, Alaska, I get the 211 page, but then when I go into the 211 page, I end up in a dead end. So if it needs to be a phone call, we just need to let people know that. Whatever it's going to take that can be minimal, to let people know that it is available, because I think we're going to also possibly be reaching a group of folks who may not have sought rental assistance before.
Right, and so I guess from my part, I would be supportive of the amendment if it's not a lot of money, if we're not talking about 3 or 5 families or 10 or 20 families that won't receive $1,000 this month. So that's the difference.
Thank you. And Ms. Alatel, can you restate the amendment, please?
Sure, Mr. Chair. After the word program on line 41, it says, and related outreach on how to access rental assistance.
Thank you.
Mr. Rivera.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. So do we have someone from United Way that's available that could speak to this?
We do. I believe that Michelle Brown is on the line, but if she's not, we could get a hold of her relatively quickly and have her join.
Sure. Michelle, are you on the line and can speak to this issue?
We are trying to get her on the line.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, while we wait, if I might.
Sure, Mr. Constant.
Yeah, I had a previous question on the topic similarly to the other program, which was how are we going to pay to administer the program? Because that was the first thing that jumped out to me. And what I heard back from the administration was that the recipient, the kind of organization that's going to run it, I forget the name of the group, they have committed to as the pilot to basically take on those expenses unto themselves. So all of the funds that we appropriate under that first pool go directly to the individual businesses as opposed to administrative funds, any kind of indirect percentage.
Thank you. I guess while we're waiting for Michelle to get on the line, Mr. Buckenstad, did you want to address another point?
I did. I just wanted to follow up just a point that Mr. Schutte made in response to a question from Assemblymember Allard. Within the Treasury guidance, it specifically lays out that eligible expenditures include expenditures related to the provision of grants to small businesses to reimburse the costs of business interruption caused by required closures. So I just wanted to put that on the record that this is a explicit eligible expense within the CARES Act. So from my perspective, I have zero worry that this will not be reimbursed or not be an allowable reimbursement when we receive the CARES Act money.
Thank you. While we are getting Michelle on the phone, do we have any other discussion? Then we'll come back to the amendment. Okay, we'll go ahead and then just take a couple-minute break while we get her on the phone. All right, couple of minutes is over. So, Michelle, are you with us?
Yes, can you hear?
Great, yes, I can hear you. So we have an amendment before us to deal with outreach, and so I'd like Ms. Zolotel to explain the amendment and then see if you have any comments.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Hi, Ms. Brown. So the amendment is to add some related outreach on how to access rental assistance. And maybe, and the reason for the amendment is when I do some Googling about rental assistance and an Anchorage, or I get on the 211 page, it looks like the best and most direct way to access the program is actually by calling. And I just want to make sure we're getting people to the right mechanism the first time so that we're not adding to their stress of having them search around for how to find rental assistance through the 211 program.
And so this is additional through the chair, may I ask a question?
Sure. Yeah, if you need some clarification.
So this is for additional outreach to make sure that there is clear online access to the different services that are available, or are you asking about why it's not always apparent that how you could go to this particular resource for this rental assistance?
Thank you for that. I want to make sure it's clear exactly where you go to ask for rental assistance through 211. And maybe it's my lack of sophistication in navigating it, but it appears that the way to do that is to call.
To the chair, the best way is to call, but it's not the only way. And the reason why it's best is because rental assistance is so scarce that providers ask us to open and close referrals when they actually have money so that they don't get constantly deluged by requests. So, for instance, in this AK Can Do, Lutheran Social Services has been the main provider in Anchorage, and when they are maxed out, they no longer accept referrals. And so if someone calls, we can give them a better quality referral because we will send them where there is money. And so, we can do more. We can say, there are other places that may have it, but if you want the most precise, up-to-date, real-time info of who has resources and what the criteria are, it is best to call. We also, though, have just developed text capacity, too, so people can do the same thing through text.
Mr. Chair, may I actually have a question for either Ms. Brown or the administration based on the new information?
Sure.
So if this $1 million goes into support rental assistance through the Alaska 211 program, where is the money actually going to land? Will it go to United Way to then be further dispersed amongst additional programs, or do we have a central single clearinghouse to disperse this money?
If we use the AK Can Do model that we've been using now, we have one agency, Lutheran Social Services, who is actually doing the direct relief. If you put in more funds that would be beyond the capacity of one, we would have a couple other providers doing a similar program. So the money would literally come to 211 or United Way, and then we give it to the agencies to distribute on the terms by which we've agreed that it'll be distributed, and to collect all the data and report back. The funds, when they are given out, are not given directly to the client. They are paid directly to a landlord or a mortgage holder or the utility.
Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Allard?
So I have a couple questions. One, who's on? Ms. Brown? Miller?
Yes, Michelle Brown. Yep.
So my question would be then, are we looking at, do you have the resources then to do the outreach because every dollar matters to these individuals?
Are you asking if we could do this, through the chair, if we could do this without any admin support?
No, I'm asking in regards to Mrs. Zalatel's amendment that we were going to look at doing outreach. Can you do that with the monies that you've already received or are going to receive?
Outreach, no. The monies that we've received so far are all going out to actual direct payments for rent and utility assistance.
And then, Mr. Chair, if it's okay, I have a question for the administration. You seemed very confident that we'll get the federal reimbursement in regards to helping our small businesses. Are you that confident when it comes to the rental relief as well for tenants?
Through the chair, Assemblymember Allard, I am, and again, just pulling from the Treasury guidance and the FAQs that they have released, the question is, would providing a consumer grant program to prevent eviction and assist in preventing homelessness be considered an eligible expense? And they say, yes, assuming the recipient considers the grants to be a necessary expense due to the COVID-19 public health emergency and the grants meet the requirements of the fund payments. So again, as I mentioned, one of the requirements is going to be they have to have been impacted as a result of this pandemic. So yes, my opinion is this will be a covered or an eligible expense to be reimbursed through this CARES Act funding.
Thank you. And Mr. Schutte, one of the things I really want, though, is that with the small businesses, that just audit to make sure that they're not double dipping in the front or the rear of the plan. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Constant?
Thank you. Are you still there, Michelle?
Yes, sir.
So the question that we're debating right now is an amendment to take a portion of the $1 million and allow United Way or another organization to do outreach and marketing that would provide members of the public who might be in need of better access to this. There's a debate between whether that's a good use of the money or not in terms of every direct dollar of relief possible is the goal. And so the question I really believe, to put a fine point on it, is United Way capable of getting the message out there, or does United Way need a small portion of these funds to provide outreach to make sure people know these funds are available?
Through the chair, we are getting enough calls right now that the word is already out there, and people are coming to 211 for the need. We're getting 3 times the average number of calls we get, and the bulk of them are for this. With some extra dollars, we could do more targeted outreach toward audiences that we know faced layoffs and furloughs and so on. And so that would, of course, help. But unless there's a lot of money behind that to actually pay the rent and utility supports, there are enough people calling now to probably meet the need, to meet the amount of money that you'd be able to put into it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Zolotel?
I'm going to withdraw the amendment, but the reason I'm going to do it, and although I think it's going to somewhat backfire, is because of the call volume already that Ms. Brown has indicated. But I think this is going to hit the media that we've allocated $1 million for rent support, and then we're going to find out it was not enough very quickly. So I want us to keep in mind who is getting the rent support and who are we missing, because I think this is a really important piece that we need to think about how people access these services. And a lot of people's initial gut reaction is to Google something or look it up online, but what we know here is call 211. So it's been quite educational. Thank you. If the second will agree to withdraw the amendment as well. And I've learned a lot about how kind of this system is working, but I think it's really important that we keep those kinds of questions at the forefront when we look at these kinds of relief or grant programs.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
May I respond to that? And
Go ahead.
I am more than happy, and in fact eager, to hear your ideas on better outreach. So I would love offline to have a discussion about ways we could do this better, with or without funding.
Great. I'll send you an email.
Thank you. Mr. Dunbar, was your...
This is Austin. I just wanted to let you know withdraw my second.
Sure. Okay, so the amendment is withdrawn. Mr. Dunbar?
Yeah, going off of something that Ms. Zolotel just said, to a certain degree, I think, there certainly isn't enough money. There's going to be more demand than there is supply here. But, hopefully we're not systematically missing one group or another. I'm curious, for Ms. Brown or for anyone else familiar with 211, for people who are deaf or hard of hearing, is it as accessible for them? Are there challenges in calling into this number?
I believe there's a service, but let me find out for sure and get back to you. I know that we have a translation service can do over 100 languages, but I'm not sure on the
the people who have hearing issues. I'm pretty sure that there is a way we deal with that, but I want to give you accurate information. So if I may, I'll answer that tomorrow. Is that acceptable?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. Okay, so any other discussion? I think we have the main motion in front of us now. Ms. Kennedy?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I am going to support the additions onto that resolution or ordinance, but for the $2 million, the extra $2 million. But what I want to talk is about the initial $10 million. So I have a couple of questions. I actually emailed Mr. Wilbur quite a few questions, and he answered all of those, some of them in lots of detail. So I really appreciate that. But I kind of had just some follow-up on that. There were, as Ms. Allard was talking about a little bit earlier, there were several contracts through LeMay for some specific people that were doing contracted work, and they were quite high. But when you do the math, if they are working 72-hour weeks at $100 an hour, it pencils out. But I guess my question in that, though, is are these contracts that have been completely fulfilled, or are these people that are still working, or maybe their services aren't quite needed quite as much as they were when they originally contracted at this? So I guess I'm trying to get at, is this just a blanket contract that's given these individuals for a 30-day period, or are they actually working on an hourly basis that is tracked?
Through the chair, Assemblymember Kennedy, so the contract is for a particular set of services for at a particular rate. I'd have to defer to Mr. Haddon, but I can't tell you if the contract ends in May or if it goes through some other point in time. I don't know, Assemblymember Kennedy. I'd have to talk to Ron Haddon about that.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that, because I did notice that some of them are definitely at different time periods, but they all seem to run about 30 days. So I didn't know if these people were actually working a full 30 days, or they're working part of that 30-day period, or these could be extended. So anyway, just kind of some general questions on those particular contracts. So my second question, though, in regard to this $10 million, I'm kind of curious as to if any part of this $10 million actually pays for our own municipal employees that have been reassigned. How are we tracking that number? I mean, do we have an actual dollar figure for that amount with those people that we have taken from their normal job? They're still municipal employees, but now we've reassigned them to emergency operation types of positions. How are we tracking that?
Through the chair, Assemblymember Kennedy, when they do it through their time card, and the reason that we have done it, we set this up probably within the first 3 days of doing the emergency to track the time, knowing that if we had municipal employees that were just pulled away from their regular job duties and assigned to response to basically serve in the Emergency Operations Center, we have the ability to request reimbursement for their time in response to that. So we track it through their time cards, and for everybody that works in response to the Emergency Operations Center and COVID-19, we have the ability to track it pay period by pay period. And then part of this $10 million does include that, because without it, they are consuming their operating budget. And we want to make sure that the dollars are actually tracked and coded to this emergency fund. It's a very similar practice we established for the earthquake, though it was much less labor related to the earthquake expenses and more capital and infrastructure response. But in this case, we started off right away. Frankly, we just used the same structure. So we do track it pay period by pay period by employee. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wilbur. Yes, I just appreciate the fact that that is actually included in the $10 million then. So that's good information. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. All right, I'm not seeing any other discussion. Members may proceed to vote.
Mr. Dunbar.
Yes.
Oops, just a second. I don't like this. We're going to do this a little differently. All right. Now, Mr. Dunbar.
Yes.
Ms. Kennedy.
Yes.
Ms. Quinn Davidson.
Yes.
Mr. Perez-Verdilla.
Yes.
Mr. Weddleton.
Yes.
That item passes. Did we miss someone?
Yes, I did not get Ms. Kennedy. Let me do that.
Okay, that item passes 11-0. That concludes our regular agenda. Special orders, there are none. Audience participation. I believe we have one individual to participate.
Hello?
Hi, Mr. Haberman. We are at audience participation. You have 3 minutes.
Okay. My name is Eugene Carl Hedman. Follow the public process. When the public process is an appropriate decision made by the governing body is more like public interest. Approximately 42 years, Alaska resident, currently resident of Mexico Valley. Let me go on one key thing. Governor Cuomo, you jumped the gun. I was planning to say at this meeting, but I've been addressing it, and that is the issue of face coverings. You know, last meeting at the Anchorage Assembly, you had a debate on whether or not to require face coverings. You didn't have a conversation with the people, but you had a conversation among yourself, and you made a decision to not require it, but no conversation with the people. There is a world health emergency. We are in an emergency, and the fact is one thing we can do is simply put a face covering. What's the problem with that? We go about and say, thank the people who work for Fred Meyer's being on the front line, people at the post office being on the front line. Thank you for the work they do. But when we say that, and we don't even do the simple thing of having a face covering when walking in, that's saying we don't care about them. We're saying we care, but we're not doing the simple task of having a face covering. What's the problem? Now, the other thing I'd like to say is this. I encourage the assembly and others in the public to listen to my testimony about 6 minutes at the last Thursday night's meeting of the General Assembly, approximately 50 minutes into the meeting. But the fact is this key thing I want to point out. In this emergency that the state and Anchorage decided to do and other parties in the World Health Emergency, you initially were selective in what businesses were open and what businesses were not. You created a situation, both in Anchorage and the state, that allowing the people to go into certain places like Target, and hordes of people would go into very few places, where places like Target was filled, like 2 weeks ago last Friday, I would witness not a single member of the public wearing a face covering. And the fact is, we encourage more health problems by creating that situation. And then when you reopen and allow business to reopen, you created a more situation as far as more requirements for those who are reopening, more so for those who reopened than those who were initially allowed to be open. And you create an economic situation where many businesses, question mark, are they going to reopen? That's a serious problem right now. And you also create a situation where there was an economic advantage of places for the box stores and forgot about Main Street Anchorage and Main Street Palmer and Wasilla and Fairbanks and elsewhere. You created that economic advantage and created a situation how business.
Thank you, Mr. Haberman.
Come back and be surviving. Thank you.
All right, we don't have anyone else for audience participation. Moving on to assembly comments, I will start on this side. Mr. Weddleton?
Nothing to add. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Zoloto?
No comments. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Perez-Verdia?
No comments. Good night, everyone.
Thank you. Mr. Peterson?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Happy Cinco de Mayo.
Thank you. Ms. Quinn Davidson?
None for me. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Ms. LaFrance?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just wanted to mention that yesterday I did participate in a Scout-sponsored citywide cleanup event, and it was probably the most fun I've ever had picking up garbage. It was socially distanced, but it was really nice to be doing something that is part of our regular routine. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Constant?
Thanks. I would apologize for our last meeting's noisy interruptions that I had, but I would once again pitch, if you get a chance, Google on YouTube AK4AK and watch the concert that was filmed. As I have mentioned to some folks, interestingly, when we passed the land acknowledgement in the code at the meeting was exactly the time Pamuo was playing on the stage. And that scene that is quite epic. So thank you all for putting up with that while I had to do what I had to do, and have a good night.
Thank you. Ms. Kennedy?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I just want to tell Mr. Constant no apology necessary. It was quite entertaining and helped lighten the meeting. So, but I agree. Mr. Chair, I do have a question for you, though. I know we're going to be having a work session on the emergency powers during the time of the temporary absence of the mayor. Did you actually set a date for that?
Yes, members should have gotten an invite to that one today.
Okay. All right, then I will check my email. Thank you. And no other comment. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Mr. Dunbar?
No comment. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Allard?
Yes, Mr. Chair, thank you. I wasn't completely on board with the $10 million. I wanted to say that, but I know that the backbone of our economy are our businesses, and I really do support that our rental relief really helps out our landlords. So thank you.
Thank you. All right. At this time, I'll take a motion to adjourn. We're adjourned.